So you know who I am by now. It's no surprise that the thing that I really loved about my naturopathic training is that it taught me that my naturopathic training wasn't enough and that I needed more. And so I kept seeking out teachers, and I found some European biological medicine classes that were being taught by a doctor from Switzerland. And his greatest gift to me was to teach me that if you could reduce oxidation on the cell membrane, if you could create a slight shift in the pH of the blood, urine, and saliva, and if you could get more minerals into the cells, a body could heal itself of anything. And so our anything that we're talking about right now is the skin. And the skin is such an amazing organ. So we're going to start from the beginning and remember that everything in your body starts with cells. And these cells form tissues. And tissues form organs, and organs form systems, and systems form organisms, and like you and your human body. And these skin cells, as you can see in the round circle, they are very interesting skin cells. And when put together, they create a tissue that is an organ that lives on your outside rather than being an internal organ. And it contains about 2 trillion cells. It weighs at least 8 pounds, and there are about 22 square feet of it covering your body. And without it, we would quite literally evaporate. We would have very little shape. And the skin has lots and lots of different functions. One of the functions is waterproofing, and we discussed how important that is. We talked about insulating and how it protects and manufactures vitamin D, and it interacts with other organs and systems. This is truly an amazing part, and we're going to kind of tie up our webinar series on the skin next week when we talk a little bit more about how it interacts with all the other organs and systems in your body. Remember that your skin's made up of 3 layers, and we're going to talk a bit about some of these things tonight. In the epidermis, it's made mostly of keratinocytes, which you really are going to want to pay attention to tonight. It contains Langerhans cells that interface with our immune system. It contains areas of pigment, melanin, that determines how dark our skin is and protects us from sunburns and all kinds of things. And then there's the dermis, which is made mostly out of collagen and elastin. It contains blood vessels and nerves and sensory fibers and hair follicle and sweat glands. So this is something you want to think about tonight as well. And then the subcutaneous, or sometimes it's called the hypodermis, and it's the fatty layer that's kind of the protection that not only feeds the skin, but it protects us from bumps and bruises. From bumps and spills, and that's where bruises kind of rise from. So skin cell progression is that about 5 weeks from the bottom layer of the epidermis to the top layer for sloughing off, and we lose an average of about 40,000 skin cells per hour. Now, when we talked about insulation, we talked about how important it is that these how important the blood vessels are, and that vasoconstriction and vasodilation help control our temperature. And I know that some of this picture, I don't know how it happened, but anyway, I want you to look at the sebaceous glands in the dermis, because this is a really good example of it. And there's also some sweat glands, but we really are going to be concerned about sebaceous glands tonight. So take a good look at that. And here was our discussion on vasodilation and vasoconstriction. And then remember, the dendrites were the nerve cells in your skin, and that they protect us from getting too much damage, but they also protect us in a different way too, and that they help us sense things in our world. So dendrites are really important. These are the nerve cells. And that another layer of protection in our skin are the phagocytes, And phagocytes will gobble up all kinds of bacteria. This is going to be important for our discussion tonight as well. And then here's the melanocyte. Too many little syllables there. And this is those purple areas, the darker purple areas are important because it's here that you produce vitamin C from sunshine. Vitamin D. Vitamin D is essential for all kinds of things, which we can get into at a later date in another advanced class. But if you use too much sunscreen, if you do not allow your skin to see the light of day, you will never produce enough vitamin D for your body. So if you're not regularly sunbathing, not during the part of the day when UV light rays are bad, but early in the morning, late in the afternoon, if you're not allowing your skin to experience the light of day, so to speak, you will not be producing enough vitamin D, and you will need to really depend on supplementation. So some of the diseases and problems of the skin from our first chart were acne, psoriasis, dermatitis, cancer, scleroderma, and dry, oily, or flaky skin. But tonight, we're going to take on these 4 topics. Eczema, which is also atopic dermatitis. And then we're going to talk about seborrheic dermatitis and Darier's disease and skin tags. So let's start with a few definitions. So dermatitis is any kind of inflammation of the skin. So when we get to our topic of atopic dermatitis, I want you to remember that any kind of dermatitis is inflammation in the skin. Sometimes it's caused by an allergic reaction. It always results in some kind of redness, itching, and sometimes some blistering. There are all kinds of reasons for dermatitis. There's contact dermatitis and atopic dermatitis, and let's see, I'm trying to think of what the other one is. These are much different than the seborrheic dermatitis in that they are more connected to the derma and not the sebaceous glands that are located in the dermis. And then let's talk about seborrheic. That just means that it's related to the sebaceous glands. So that's why I had you take a look at those. And then keratosis is a wart-like growth that's generated by the proteins. Remember in the first layer of our skin, our epidermis, was keratinocytes. I'm having the worst trouble with pronunciation. Keratinocytes, and those are proteins. And so the keratosis are wart-like growths that are generated by those proteins found in the epidermis and dermis. So as we move along here, you're going to see some pictures that will make your skin kind of hurt a little bit. And we're going to talk about which waters and which water protocols and that kind of thing would you use to help someone who had these kinds of issues. So let's start talking about atopic dermatitis. So atopic dermatitis or eczema is caused by a number of factors. So for instance, I was born with eczema. Eczema is often an allergic reaction to milk or wheat. If you have people in your life that have atopic dermatitis and they have not eliminated wheat and dairy from their diets, they're kind of barking up a wrong tree if they think it's ever going to get better. But I will tell you that my atopic dermatitis or eczema virtually disappeared when I changed my diet and added Kangen water. When I changed my diet, it dramatically improved. But once I started Kangen water, I have never had another episode of eczema, and that's been since 2005, which is kind of anyone who has fair skin, especially redheads, we tend to have all kinds of skin issues. It's all that lack of much pigment in our skin, I guess. I don't know, or maybe heritage or whatever, but it's a real situation. And a lot of mine would happen, and I wouldn't know why. Now, when I do start to feel some itchiness increases, that's where atopic dermatitis generally happens first. You can see in this little infant foot, in the creases of this baby's foot, you can see where it started. And then on the child's leg over there, you can see how much worse it is at the crease of the knee and then the creases in the back of the ankle. And then it will spread from there. But it generally will happen in the crease of your arm, the creases in your neck, in your groin, in the back of your knees, in your elbow, the bend of your elbows, your wrists, between your fingers, between your toes, that kind of thing. Especially if you're having some contact dermatitis on top of that. And so I found out that I was allergic to pineapple via contact of it. And I thought it was just happening to my skin until I did a parasite cleanse with a bunch of patients, and you could only eat pineapple or papaya for 24 hours. And my tongue literally just cracked open and bled because that was an example of contact dermatitis, which was feeding into my atopic dermatitis. So the joys of having one of those bodies that's good to experiment on. So atopic dermatitis will often be accompanied not only by redness and itching, but you can see in these pictures some scaliness, and sometimes it weeps and it has a kind of a yellow crustiness about it. So when you think about all the types of water that you can make with your machine, which one do you think is going to break up that yellow crustiness that has to come off before you could clean it? Anybody have a guess?
2.5?
Yes. No, sorry, wrong. Opposite direction.
11.5, huh?
Exactly. 11.5 will emulsify that fatty, oily content that is in that yellow sebaceous secretion that happens with all kinds of dermatitis. So if you start with 11.5 to emulsify that, and then move on to 2.5 to disinfect the area, because one of the things that happens is that now your skin is open to all kinds of bacteria, viruses, and fungus. And so, because it's got all these little cracks in it. So we want to do the same thing that our immune system would normally do. So our immune system would normally send the free radicals, which would be found in the 2.5 water, to kill those bacteria and viruses. So you remember the phagocytes that were eating up the yeast cells in that one picture? Well, those phagocytes are so overburdened when someone has cuts and cracks and fissures in their skin, because it's just constantly gobbling up the microbial invaders, that we need to give it some assistance. So in order to give it the assistance that it needs, we first have to remove that crustiness. Once we've got the crustiness gone, then we saturate the area with 2.5 water to help those phagocytes do their job. We're taking a little burden off. And then what we want to do is flood the area with what do we want to do next? So we did 2.5. Now what are we going to do?
6.0. Feed water.
Not quite. That'll be the last step. So now we want to flood the area with antioxidants, right? Because we oxidized the heck out of it with 2.5 water. And now we're going to follow it with antioxidant water. Because if we continue to if we don't do that, because that's how our body works. Our body sends the invaders, and then it sends all kinds of antioxidants to the area to mop up the collateral damage. So that's the same thing that we want to do. We're going to remove that crustiness from the outside. Then we're going to flood it with oxidation to kill the microbes. Then we're going to flood it with antioxidants to mitigate the damage. And then we're going to balance it with the between 4 and 6 pH water, the beauty water. Now we have put some balance back in that skin. Because as you can see from these pictures, that is not balanced skin. It is red and itchy and inflamed. So anytime we have inflammation, we know a couple of things are going on. Anytime we have an inflammatory response, that means our body's going to be sending a bunch of free radicals to the area to try to mop up the damage. So we want to help it along. Once we've helped it along at killing the bacteria, virus, fungus, whatever those invaders are, then we want to flood the area with antioxidants to bring some healing, a different level of healing response back to the skin, or in this case, the skin. But then we have to balance the pH because we've upset it in multiple directions. We upset it when we put the 11.5 water on to take care of the oils and lift the oils off. Then because we made it now too alkaline. Then we put 2.5 water on to kill the microbes, and now we've got it too acidic, and that's going to be irritating as well. And then we put 11.5 on to help restore the antioxidant levels. And then now we have to go back and put some beauty water on it to get that skin back to a normal pH. Remember that you always have to let it dry between the additions of the different waters, or you're basically not getting anywhere. Does anybody have any questions before we move on to our next topic? All right. So let's talk about seborrheic dermatitis. So this little baby down here, that's called, the common term for it is cradle cap. Born with that. But I had tons of hair. So imagine how much fun that was for my mom. A whole mop of red hair with cradle cap. But that's a sign that that body's probably going to be set up for atopic dermatitis later. But seborrheic dermatitis happens in places where there are more sebaceous glands. So the scalp is particularly, rife with sebaceous glands. Otherwise, our hair would get too dry, our scalp would get too dry. So dandruff isn't usually because the skin is too dry. It's because it has a little dermatitis going on and it's oily. So we generally want to take care of the scalp by getting the oils out. Get the oils out with 11.5 water. So this is the time, if you have someone with seborrheic dermatitis or a little baby with cradle cap, this has some fungal overtones to it. This is going to be more likely to have yeast overgrowth as it progresses. So you would actually separate the hair and spritz 11.5 water, and just keep making parts and spritzing, making parts and spritzing, and have them massage it in a little bit and then wash their hair. And you want to wash your hair always with beauty water. So this is the one time when you're going to do 11.5 water and not do 2.5 water. The only time you would use 2.5 water is if you were starting to see some fungal issues happening. If you're starting to get some little splits or cracks or fissures in the scalp, it's starting to have little bloody spots. It looks like on this baby, like that baby might be having some. And so that would be a good idea after applying the 11.5 water to apply some 2.5 water before washing that baby's hair in beauty water.
So when you say 11.5, is it the aged 11.5 so that it'll take out the oil, or just fresh? Will it take it off?
So if you're not able to emulsify oil with your fresh 11.5 water, it's because you have too much calcium in your water. And so pay attention to that. But yeah, you could use the older 11.5 water because it's particularly good at emulsification after a day or two because the calcium's all dissipated out of it. And then when you're talking about disinfecting for, these kind of medicinal things with 2.5 water, it should be as fresh as possible. Fresh 2.5 water has more disinfecting power than older 2.5 water. And then beauty water changes pH when you heat it. I don't know if any of you ever tried this before, but you can take beauty water and heat it, and it will change to become alkaline. So you kind of have to wash it with cool water. So my take, how I do it, you can do it however you want. When you're wanting to rinse your body or rinse your hair with the beauty water, I have it in a container that I sit in a bowl of warm water so that it's not cold or it's not room temperature, it's warm. It's a good way to end your shower because it kind of, so it stimulates your lymphatic system because you were warm and now you're cool, and that sends a lot of blood and lymph to the surface of the skin. But it's never going to be as warm and fun as your shower or your bath, but but you can warm it up so it's not shockingly cold. So seborrheic dermatitis is always going to have that oily component to it. And it can actually spread to other areas. It can take over on eyebrows and men with beards or mustaches. It can happen there. And it can happen because of oiliness. It can happen along the bridge of your nose. Wow. It can happen in the groin, a few other places. So it's a particularly nasty, itchy thing that can really become yeasty pretty quick. Any questions on this one? All right, let's move around to Darier's disease. Now this one's pretty rare. It's a genetic disease, and it starts out with little nodules that are kind of hard, and it's a little itchy, but it spreads. And when it spreads, people don't usually come back from this. This isn't something that's like atopic dermatitis where you treat it and it's gone and maybe you'll have a recurrence. This can happen permanently to these people's skin. And it can, in rare cases, cover almost their entire body. And their skin is very fragile. As you can see from this man's forehead, it has totally taken over the skin on his entire forehead, in his scalp, in his eyebrows, the whole thing. And it happens in places that have more sebaceous glands because it has an oily component as well. Now, this I've never treated, but my brain tells me that these people would be great candidates for these skin protocols. Just imagine how fragile that skin is. You can see all the little breaks where it's bloody, and gotta believe that cannot be comfortable in any way, shape, or form. So just imagine the relief that they would get from just balancing the pH of the skin. So now you're going to use 11.5 water to get rid of all this crustiness, so their skin begins to actually look somewhat normal. Now you're going to kill the bacteria that's causing these fissures. Now, the other thing to think about is that when someone has trapped, like these, it happens when sebaceous glands can get kind of backed up. So imagine if you're using 11.5 water, you're actually penetrating the skin, and it would allow the sebaceous glands to effectively get the stuff out instead of having it kind of trapped in there, causing these nodules that eventually start oozing this stuff out. And these people's skin smells bad. So imagine what a life sentence that kind of is, to walk around with this scaly, smelly skin. Talk about having your contact with the world be affected by the condition of your skin. So just imagine what kind of life-altering situation it would be if you could help somebody reverse this back to at least fairly normal skin. I mean, I have so much heartfelt compassion for these people. It makes me want to go find someone who has it just so I can try it out and see if there's anything that, what the possibilities are. But I have seen people with psoriasis and eczema that looked almost this bad. And their skin was cleared up in a pretty short period of time. Within a month, it looked like absolutely normal skin. Remember, it takes 5 weeks from the bottom of the epidermis until it's left off. And if you remember your whole cell membrane talk, we have to change the cell membrane. So they've got to be flooding their body from the inside with water as well, so that the antioxidants are actually getting to the skin cells, so that we're beginning to change the quality and the health of the individual cells as well. Again, this looks very much like a problem with mostly dairy products. Now, I don't know if you know this, but there are 2 kinds of proteins in milk. I'm starting to see some TV ads about it. It's fairly new information, not like within the last year or so, but there are 2 kinds of proteins in milk. Some cows give A1 proteins, the Holstein cows, and the brown cows give an A2 protein milk. Now, when I was growing up, when I was really little, we had a brown cow, and I drank milk and I didn't have any problems. We got a dairy farm. They were almost all black and white Holstein cows. I started having some serious problems. I didn't realize, I just thought I was allergic to milk. And then when I tried some organic raw milk from brown cows, I can have it and it doesn't bother me, because I could always have goat's milk or sheep's milk, which has the same protein in it as the brown cows. So I would recommend, but when I see something like this, I recommend that people just drop all dairy altogether, because we don't know if they're allergic to A1 or A2 protein. Anybody have any questions about this?
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure.
I am currently treating a 28-year-old girl that has Darier's disease, and she said she developed it when she was 20.
Yes.
And it's the worst it's ever been now. And
how old is she? 28?
She's 28 now.
Okay.
And it's mainly on her scalp, but it's also on her side of her neck and like kind of in her cleavage on her chest. Anyways, her scalp is so bad, she's actually balding. And it was so thick with a crusty flakiness, and it was bloody underneath. And I just kind of followed your eczema or psoriasis protocol in your book. And I just told him to spray it with 2.5 and then follow it with 11.5 and then follow backwards. That with 6.0. And
but that's backwards. You got to start with 11.5 and then the 2.5.
Oh, that's what I mean. I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Well, okay. Yes. That is how I did it.
Okay.
Yes. And now the flakiness is completely gone. And yes, and the skin, the little broken, they're almost completely healed over. She's also now, though, getting laser treatments as well, and I'm not quite sure why, because she was only using the spray for maybe 5 days, and it looked, I would say, 75% better. Yes, it was amazing. So, a couple questions for you. Do you think that her hair is going to grow back?
Not if she uses lasers.
Oh, okay. I did. Okay. Now, the dermatologist's office actually has a Kangen water machine, so that was kind of funny. I learned that. So then the other question was, how fresh do I want to be giving her fresh water in her spray bottles? Like, how long can they go?
Well, the 2.5 water should be replaced every, if it were me, I'd replace it every 2 days.
Okay.
And the 11.5 water, because this is, I mean, there's two 11.5 waters that you need. You need the one that's lifting, and you need the one that's delivering some antioxidants.
Okay.
So those are different. One would be older, to do the emulsification, and ideally the antioxidant one would be really fresh. This hair will regrow. It might not ever be as thick, and it might not be quite as healthy, but I have seen all kinds of people with all kinds of alopecia problems, which is what she's developing, is alopecia from this, because it basically smothered her scalp. And so hair follicles were damaged.
Right.
But I've seen men, I mean, this is one of the earliest things I saw when I went to the first meeting about, when I was learning about water, or these two Japanese guys that were bald, and they were, like they showed us their before and their after, and then we could see their after. And wow, I mean, they had half their hair on their head back, and they had been cue balls.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I had, because of stress, I had lost, more than half of my hair because I was so sick, and I'd been so sick. You could see like major scalp. I was definitely balding, and it all came back pretty quickly. So, but lasers do some damage to the skin that you can't repair. And they will damage the hair follicles, so they will not be repairable.
Okay, I will let her know that. I'm not sure if her dermatologist office told her that, but she got 2 treatments last week, and I think she's going to get another 2 to 3 more laser treatments this week. And I'm not quite sure why they're going that route with it, since the Kangen water is healing her. But I will let her know that, and that there is hope for her hair to grow back.
Yeah, I mean, I would tell her that within 3 months she should start seeing some hair regrowth. If she's really, really like conscientious about doing this protocol.
Okay. And then the 6.0 water, obviously the fresher the better. But they're kind of across town, and I'm trying to get them to fill up their little spray bottles more often, but they just are kind of, I don't know, they're maybe not so educated on, they think that it's going to stay good it's been about a week and a half now. So I just want to make sure that by spraying it, they're not going to actually hurt anything.
It won't hurt anything. It's just not going to be as helpful.
Be as effective. Okay, got it. So 2 days on the sanitizing water, and you would say, so I have a K8, so I have, the 11.5 that emulsifies like right away.
Yeah. So that's perfect. So the best way to share the water with her then would be to put it in a bunch of little bottles where it's filled all the way to the top and tightly sealed.
Okay.
And then she doesn't open that until she's ready to do her treatment.
Got it.
And then stick the sprayer in the bottle.
Okay. great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have a question or comment? I'm really happy to hear about that. Keep me updated with her progress.
I will, and I will actually maybe ask if I can share the before and after pictures so that you can kind of see
yeah.
students.
That'd be great.
I'm sure you'd be interested in that.
Yes.
I was pleased.
I myself have a little issue going on. I woke up this morning with my eye swollen shut, has like a sty or something, or maybe a bite. I don't know. But thanks to water protocols, I actually have an open right eye.
Yay.
But no makeup because, you know, it's not very good when you're trying to get over something. So
right. But
Dr. Parker, all natural. There's not really that much difference. Skin tags. So skin tags are actually tumors. And most of them are, you know, most of the time they stay benign. But sometimes they don't. And so it's really important to keep track of them. In homeopathic world, people who develop a lot of skin tags are people who are prone to cancer. I've had cancer twice and I have a fair amount of skin tags. So in my case, it seems to be the truth. So skin tags, treatment of skin tags is to actually use beauty water more often. I'm pretty lax about it these days, and my skin tags have gotten worse. So a lot of it's hormonally driven. So a lot of women get skin tags after they've given birth and their hormones or while they're pregnant. It also tends to happen during perimenopause and during menopause for women, and during andropause for men. Skin tags inherent, like they're not generally cancerous, but can sometimes become cancerous and tend to develop on people who have blood sugar issues, who have hormonal imbalance issues, that kind of thing. So they're kind of like a canary in a coal mine. So if you tend to have skin tags or know someone who does, you know you really ought to watch. Probably ought to have your hormone levels checked. Probably ought to look at your blood sugar pretty often and make sure that that's not an issue. And just keep treating the cells from the inside. Now, some, like I don't have any that are big like this. I mean, mine are kind of tiny little ones. If only you could see my finger, I would be showing you where I'm pointing. But in that bottom picture, the little tiny ones, that's more of what mine are like. I did have bigger ones before I started drinking Kangen water, and they fell off on their own. You know, your body will do remarkable things sometimes. So it's just, they are something that you should have checked pretty regularly. But honestly, I think the best situation for skin tags, if they're bothering you, if they're in a place that, so I forgot, some of the other things that cause skin tags are ill-fitting clothing, do away with your Spanx, ladies. That's not really, they're not good for you. And so really tight-fitting clothes that rub or chafe will cause them. What else? Hormones, like I said. Food allergies can cause skin tags. Anything that bothers your skin, anything that, even things like using certain laundry detergents can start a skin irritation that can actually turn into a skin tag. Like I said, some skin tags will go away, some will fall off, some will just disappear, and you don't even know what happened to them because it's not like you found them laying around anywhere. You just notice one day that they're gone. And that generally happens when you are using when you're using beauty water regularly at the end of your shower. Because I need you to remember that soap of all kinds is very alkaline and your skin is not. So when we shower, Our city water is generally at least slightly alkaline. We're using soap that's quite alkaline. Now we're all finished. We dry off and our skin is dry. So most of us use lotion. But if you use beauty water, a spritz of beauty water first, before you put lotion on, you really change the pH of your skin. You put it back to the place it needs to be its healthiest and most moisturized. And then if you want to add some lotion, it's great. I mean, that's the great thing about these water machines is that they save you so much money in so many ways that you don't really think about. So you can use a quarter as much lotion as you used to because your skin's not so dry anymore. Even during harsher weather, your skin's just not as dry because you're properly hydrated, which works its way out to your skin. And then if you're using beauty water at the end of a shower or bath, you're rebalancing your skin and it's not as dry. So anybody have any questions about skin tags? They can be removed at the doctor's office if they're bothering you. They will either freeze them or and snip them off or burn them off. You don't really want to have too many of them done at one time. It's kind of painful when the deadening agent wears off.
People shouldn't cut them off themselves. I've known people that, you just cut them off.
Well, that can open you up to all kinds of infections. Yeah. So you want to be careful about that. I guess if you were really armed with your water protocols for skin wounds, but yeah, it seems like that would hurt.
Same with warts. Should they cut warts off?
No one should ever cut a wart off. No, okay. No.
Good to know.
Warts are fungal infections. And so you can treat them all in a lot of different ways. You treat the underlying cause of the fungal or yeast infection that you have. And then I know this sounds weird and has nothing to do with water, but if you put a piece of duct tape on a wart, it will fall off.
Suffocates it, right?
Yeah, I don't know what nasty stuff is in that duct tape that kills it, but it does.
Yeah. And then some tea tree or something.
Yes, and tea tree oil is excellent antimicrobial agent for all kinds of things. Okay. Duct tape. What are you going to say? Anybody else have a question about skin tags or a comment? Nope. All right. So let's talk about this little slide for a second. This is where I want you to really just wrap your head around this so firmly, is that what we're always trying to do, no matter what the disease process, no matter what the illness, no matter what's going on, this is what we're trying to do. We want to make these daughter cells healthier with each new generation. So remember that when a cell divides and multiplies by mitosis, this is an illustration of mitosis. When that happens, what it's doing is, as you can see you got a cell and now you've got one that's dividing and now it's further dividing and now it's really dividing and now it's divided. Well, every cell will make a cell that's identical to the parent cells. It'll make two cells that are identical to the parent cell. So if they're unhealthy, they have unhealthy babies or daughters. I'd like to call them maybe son cells instead. We don't need to all be everything to go back to women, right? So these daughter cells we have an opportunity to affect these daughter cells. We have an opportunity to change these two new daughter cells and to make them a little bit more healthy. So as they divide and multiply, they've got a slightly healthier couple of daughter cells. And as we impact those daughter cells and they divide and multiply, we have another generation of slightly healthier, and then another generation of slightly healthier, and another generation of slightly healthier. And we just keep moving in that direction. So in some areas, it's going to go fast, and in some areas, it's going to go slower. But it is possible to make an impact to change everything on this very most basic cellular level. Because remember, the number one problem with most skin issues is that it begins with oxidation. Oxidation happens when we're bombarded by free radicals, 10,000 of them per cell per day, which changes the cell membrane. In this illustration, that cell membrane is semi-permeable and fluid, and it allows oxygen and water in. Now, one thing I've never really explained, and I'm going to get there in a minute, is this whole idea of being semi-permeable and why oxygen is so important in the cell. We'll explain that in a second. Here we are with the cell membrane that has changed and become thick and sticky, like the fat on the vent fan in your kitchen. Disgusting, doesn't allow much water in, doesn't allow much oxygen in, traps carbon dioxide in. Now, remember, I got it right here, when we're producing ATP, that's how our cells are fueled by ATP. So everything that happens in the cell requires energy. In a cell where there's not enough oxygen to do this little performance in the mitochondria here, what happens is that our cells change because they still have to have energy. And it might be low quality energy, but it's still energy, so the cell can still stay alive, unhealthy, but alive. When we can't get enough oxygen in the cell, instead of burning carbohydrates in the presence of oxygen, the cell will ferment carbohydrates using carbon dioxide. That it's like your cells are drunk. Drunk anything never functions very well, right? Drunk people don't function very well. You saw those birds that were eating, I don't know if you did, but I did, some berries back east that were fermenting because of the weather changes. And these birds were eating these fermented berries and flying into windows and acting all crazy like they were drunk. They were walking around and falling over, just like people do when they're drunk. Same thing happens in our cells. This is why this whole idea of pH got so popular, is because of this fermentation process. Well, the fermentation process is not a result of the wrong pH in the cell. It's a result of having not enough oxygen in the cell, which is a result of having a non-functioning cell membrane. So this is where the pH story got all, we think we know everything, and we think we know something, and it just extrapolates and it builds and it builds and it builds. Well, this is how that pH story, that you've got to alkalinize your body. What we needed to do was oxygenate it. The only ways we could do that was to change the cell membrane. So now you know better, right? Now you know better. So oxidation leads to dehydration, which leads to inflammation, and all we have to do to reverse that is use some antioxidants. And the perfect antioxidants are found in Enagic's water. And it's not in all ionized water, but in high quality ionized water, because when water and electricity comes together, it produces some interesting things. It's going to give us more oxygen. It's going to give us this all-important hydrogen. And while the ions create the pH changes, it's the hydrogen that creates the antioxidants. So we really want to concentrate on high concentrations of hydrogen gas. because in the presence of platinum, hydrogen gas will give up its electrons and give us what is ideally the best antioxidant. Because as a free radical that's lost its electron and becomes obsessed with finding another one, if we can just give it back its electron, then we're in perfect shape. There are some instances and some free radicals that are perfectly suited for hydrogen gas, and others that are better suited for free electrons. And that's the great news about ionized water, is that they contain both. Because remember, traditional antioxidants have limitations, but when you're thinking about how do you help the skin, vitamin C really does help the skin. And while vitamin E is primarily for cardiovascular system, it does help with scar tissue. So, we've been talking a lot about the protocols in this book. If you don't have that book, please be sure to order it, because this is that downward spiral of illness, which this illustration is actually in Turning Back the Hands of Time. So if you don't have that one, you might want to get it too. It just takes you through what's happening in the skin. In all these skin diseases, this is exactly the path that happened. And we can actually return it by changing the trajectory and adding in more free electrons, more hydrogen gas. We're going to restore the hydration, which will balance the pH. We're going to increase the levels of oxygen so that more energy can be produced by the cells. And when our cells have enough energy, they become high functioning, and then the tissues are revitalized. And this is how we impact the health of people all over the world.